Okay, good evening and welcome to our Rural Support and Wellbeing webinar this evening. Tonight's is going to be on livestock movement and adverse weather. This is our last one in our very long series of webinars that are being funded by the Future Farm Resilience Project. Tonight, we have some really great speakers to finish our series of webinars off. But just a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, everyone is welcome and we really would love you to contribute to this evening's presentation and webinar. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question. We've also got the chat facility. So if you don't want to ask your question by speaking, you can just type it in the chat and someone will be monitoring that throughout the evening, and we will raise any questions you have with our speakers as we go through. If there's any other questions that any of you have at any time, please just pop it into the chat and we'll do our best to facilitate that. Also, tonight's webinar is being recorded. And if there's anything that we talk about or anything that's shared that you wouldn't like to be put on the open channels, so onto YouTube and onto our website, if you just want to get in contact with myself or Sam, then on the email or the telephone number shown on the screen, then we can make sure that we remove that or edit it. We'd rather you can contribute and talk freely this evening, and then we can remove it from the recording if you would so wish. Okay, so tonight's webinar, we have 3 speakers this evening. The first is Holly Purdy, who's a farmer, and she is also the vice chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network. We've also got Rebecca Barker from Heart of the Southwest Trading Standards. She's one of our trading standards officers and she's going to talk about livestock movements. And we've also got Richard Sampson from the Farming Community Network. So Holly, I think you would like to go first this evening. And if you're happy to share your slides, that would be amazing. Please feel free to put your camera on as well if you'd like to.
So, evening everyone. I am really keen to try and, when I give presentations, I am really keen to just talk about practical examples rather than just sort of talking about concepts or thinking about things that could be done. Actually just give practical examples about what other farmers have done. So I'm a farmer myself. We farm on a National Trust tenant farm on Exmoor, and we're pretty much all lowland pasture, despite the fact that we're at the base of the highest point on Exmoor, below Dunkery Beacon. We're actually all lowland, which is a mix of permanent pasture and herbal lays. But when we took our farm tenancy on 7 years ago, it definitely wasn't resilient to weather shocks. So I sort of wanted to show you what we've done on our farm, and it might help sort of inspire you to look at if you've got problems on your farm and take it forwards. So our specific challenges for our farm, and it might match with some of your farms, we had really low organic matter in our soil, low fungi, low carbon to nitrogen ratio, compaction, low capital investment as brand new tenant farmers, and low diversity in our grassland swards. So just a few issues. But what we sort of have developed is a really, really low input system. We don't carry very much machinery. We just have one small yard tractor, but we are really diverse in what we grow essentially in terms of our cattle, sheep, goats and chickens. That's really based on lots of elements, learning from nature, thinking about how diversity goes across everything. And so we want to have a diverse farm business as part of that. But we are now a completely grass-fed system, and we operate in a sort of rotational grazing manner, not strict mob grazing, but small fields, really traditional, how it traditionally used to be done. And in terms of how we've got to that point, a lot is around genetics, blood tested our ewes, blood tested our cattle, seeing how they're doing, if they needed additional support, and that's built the confidence in it. But that's just to give you a little overview of what we do at home. But what I wanted to focus on tonight is building climate resilience. That's definitely something that we're all going to have to think about more in the future and right now as well. But unfortunately, as I go through, I'll talk about some of the ways we've done that. And that doesn't always happen overnight. Some things are really quite an instant win, and some things we're just going to have to sit and wait a little while for. I kind of think for the next generation to hopefully benefit from. If you've got any questions, I'm really happy for you to put them in the chat as we go along, and yeah, answer those at the end as well. So the sort of two key stresses in terms of climate resilience I wanted to focus on tonight was drought and excessive rain and flooding, the sort of two extreme ends of the spectrum, and how do we mitigate that as farmers. Now, something that we did, which was actually funded through a resilience farming project on Exmoor, is we did something through Nethergill Associates, which was a maximum sustainable output. But essentially what that means is you take your farm through a whole process, and ultimately it comes back to your free issue natural resources. So sunlight and rainfall are two of those elements. And that's why I wanted to focus on those as well, because they're absolutely key for us as farmers to grow food. We need both of those elements, but how do we harness them when they're coming to us in such extreme ways? So this is an overview of my farm. It is a 200-acre, now all grassland. So it used to be arable, and we put in, when we arrived, we changed the arable to herbal lays or permanent pasture, depending on the field. But as you can see, they're really wide, large fields. We have a lot of south-facing slopes, so we burn off really quickly when it's sunny, essentially. And we needed to find ways to manage the whole farm a lot better, essentially. So we sort of started by dividing our fields to aid our grazing better, so getting better rotational grazing. We put in some soil monitoring, so we started to look at how quickly water was percolating through the soil, looking at the health of our soil, and we started to do a lot of tree planting, which I'm going to talk about. Why?
Sorry, Holly, I can't see your.
What can't you see?
I can only see your front screen. I don't know if I've done something wrong.
What I was showing you, which you can't see, is like a flyover of the farm. So we had a drone survey done. So I was describing essentially a visual of a flyover of the farm. If you're happy to describe the slide, you can see if it has arrived. Just to keep me.
Oh, so you, yeah, we can see the view of the farm now, like the fields and all the hedgerows and stuff.
Great. Perfect. I'll just have a nice little pause every time I move slide, and then it might catch up. So essentially, we had a drone survey done. Unfortunately, it is a video which will give you a flyover of the farm, but
so we're getting changes of the fields. It is changing with us.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, fabulous. So that essentially was just me sort of talking around how we divided the fields to aid grazing, planning, soil monitoring, tree planting, and reverting those arable fields to herbal lays. Because, and let's hope this video plays, one of the problems we had in particular was water runoff. And at high rainfall events, this is a real challenge for us. So we've worked really, really hard as farm to try and mitigate this, because we just essentially were seeing us, not only our soil, but also all the water that we needed pretty much just running off the farm, which you may, are you able to see the video?
I can just see a still picture of it.
Okay, we'll go with that. Essentially what it does is it pans out and it shows you a large flow of water passing through one of our fields, because essentially when we moved in, what there was a series of drains which were obviously designed to carry the water off as fast as possible off the farm. And we sort of looked at this as, one, a lot of the drains had started to erode and needed a lot of repair if we wanted to do that. But we'd just gone through this really big drought period in 2018, and we started to look at things differently and think, well, actually, would it be better if we try and hold this water on the farm to aid our summer grazing, essentially extend our grazing period, but almost sacrifice some of those fields in the winter or some of those areas in the winter, because allow them to lie wetter, but then actually increase our productivity outside in the summer season when we didn't have enough rain. We sort of sit in a bit of a rain shadow. So it was trying to think differently and challenge ourselves instead of just letting that water leave the farm really quickly, just get it off, keep our fields dry in the winter. Actually, did we need to think about it differently, think about it all year round? So hopefully the slides will keep catching up. How we did this is we approached it of like 3 elements. So guarding the soil, animal welfare, and slowing the flow of water. So these were sort of our key 3 focus points to build resilience from a drought perspective and from a flooding perspective. And we did that in a series of ways, which I don't think the circles should move, if you can see the circles on a map, but we'll just go with it. So essentially, trees, put in a huge number of trees, which in itself we're going to touch on a little bit more in a moment, but really a lot of that is around animal welfare. So obviously we all know that animals are getting heat stress from like 25 degrees, if not 22, in high humidity. And we start to see these periods in the summer where we were not able to sort of control some of that heat stress with our animals, particularly our sheep when they were heavy in fleece. If it was an earlier time, you know, if the heat was coming earlier, like in April or May during lambing one year, it was a real challenge for us as farmers to try and manage that. So essentially, by bringing trees in, we help to maintain a more even temperature in the soil. So it's growing the grass better, it's shading the soil, so it's keeping a more even temperature and keeping that moisture in to lower evaporation rates. So increasing our grassland productivity while also decreasing the chance of heat stress in our animals. So rather than just having a single tree in a field where they all gather, which obviously, as we all know, ultimately leads to more issues around foot health or disease, it was just allowing long-term thinking around that spread of the animals across a field, increasing our grass productivity and improving things for the animals. And then in the center of the screen, hopefully you're seeing a large red area marked out with some trees. That what we just made a decision to do was to make more space for water. So it's a little bit challenging because you've got to think around removing that little bit of land from agricultural production. But ultimately for us, we saw it as a way of increasing productivity in the long term. So that area, we brought the fences out, we broke some of the ditches and allowed the water to just hold in that area. So we're essentially just creating a wetland, a mini wetland, and that's really helped slow that flow of water down. We get a lot of runoff off the hill behind us off the road, and our farm essentially was taking it. And we just thought, rather than it flooding our tracks, let's create space for it, let's manage it. And actually that will then benefit and percolate into our soils and help us longer term with the issues that we were having. And then I've marked a hedgerow on the top right of the screen. That's really just thinking around, we planted a lot more hedgerows. As I said, we divided those fields up. We planted hedgerows across slopes to try and slow that flow of water down. And then coming back to that shade and shelter of the livestock, just increasing that. So breaking whether it's wind or sun or whatever it might be, just increasing the area that livestock could seek shade and shelter, and also slow that flow of water down. So that again, we're slowing that flow, keeping it onto the farm rather than sending it off the farm. And then on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see sort of a red ring with some brown soil areas essentially, and these, I've got some better pictures of those. Those are what we put in as called flow ponds. So essentially we mapped areas where the water was running significantly, so flow pathways, and we put some flow ponds in, and essentially they are just a pond that operates just when you're getting high levels of rainfall, and they just capture the water and they just slow it down. They stop. It manages the flooding as well, because we were getting this large flooded area at the bottom of that field. It manages that. We no longer get that, and it just helps hold that water. And again, then it's utilized later in the year rather than right then. then just below that area is a marked area where we've been putting in tree coops, again in these flow pathways. And long term, those fences will come out, which are protecting the trees currently. But we're putting in things like hazel and willow, all things which are going to benefit the livestock long term as well. And then you'll see 3 darker red lines across the field. And that's because we've just started to really change around how we're grazing, increasing the diversity of the sward, and a longer sward height as well. So I'm just going to touch a little bit more on integrating trees, because I'm a great believer in the right tree in the right place. We should only really be integrating trees where it's right for our farm, right for our livestock, and there is no doubt that planting trees is not for the faint-hearted. So when you have got a farm that floods or is drought subject to drought, it's not easy to get trees to establish. So we've been through a challenge to achieve that. And also we try to see them as part of our productivity of our farm. So it might be future wood fuel, it might be apples or plums. So we've put in a lot of fruit trees as well. And so we're thinking about it from multiple ways of harvesting that produce going forward. So it's part of our farming system, not just a tree in itself. And it's, you know, so that's the economic diversity. It brings a lot of soil health benefits. The microbiology in your soil communicates with the tree roots and the grassland roots, and it helps lengthen that grass growing season because again it's maintaining a more even soil temperature, so it's improving my growth rates with my animals in time. Obviously the benefits that I'm getting right now with very young trees are minimal, but that is the idea of taking those trees forward. So hopefully you can now, we'll come onto your screen, it will be this flow ponds clearer. So this is a closer up image of some of the examples of the flow ponds. Essentially, it's pretty cheap and easy to do. It's just a day's work with a digger. And the only thing is you have to do it in the summer. So you have to hope you've got it in the right place because you don't always know. And that's how they look after a heavy rain period. And you have 1 large pool and then 3 smaller pools. So essentially what I've lost is a small area of grassland. This is our hay meadow because we're under a species rich grassland creation in this meadow. So we have lost a proportion of the meadow, but we've started to see the benefits. This was in year 1. So this is really doesn't look like bare soil anymore. It just looks like grassy banks. And it actually holds the water for longer now. So initially it was just sort of 2 to 3 days, but now it'll hold them for up to a week. And with time, that'll hold it for longer and longer. The other areas we did were, again, where we were seeing a lot of runoff. And not only that, but also we looked at old maps where old ponds had been and tried to sort of think around what decisions people had made in the past on their farms and tried to put some of those things back, because ultimately we found they were generally in the right place when we looked at those old maps. I'm not sure the video will play for you, but hopefully you're seeing a picture of some longer grass sward. So obviously with permanent pasture, we haven't been able to necessarily stitch in any species, particularly on some of the species rich grassland creation areas. It's a little bit because of stewardship. We're obviously limited with what we can do. But what we have done is by having the more rotational grazed approach, it's allowed us to get these longer sward heights. But it definitely has meant we've had to look at the genetics of our animals in that. And I find that really exciting. So we run North Country Cheviots and Welsh ewes. So someone described it as short legs, but big rumens. So those big rumens breaking down those grasses. And we've been pretty hard on our culling policy. You know, animals that aren't performing on that system don't stay. And that's essentially how we've got them doing really well in these longer grass swards. And we finish all our lambs direct and sell them direct, either through our own farm shop and another supplier that specializes in grass-fed lamb. So that's worked really well for us because we've been able to look at the genetics and get the right genetics for our system as well. Alongside that grassland, we've also really wanted to focus on the sort of species that are going to be drought tolerant as well. So the longer grass sward helps in the winter as well with slowing the flow of water, but actually looking at what can we get from a tolerant perspective in the summer. So things like bird's foot trefoil, they were doing really well in times of drought. Yarrow is quite drought resistant. Meadow fescue grass, the chicory worked really well in our herbal lays. So it's sort of seeing what works on our farm and then supporting those species to work well. And hopefully the screen will catch up, but what you're seeing is I undertook a project with Exmoor National Park where we tested 20 species of tree and of herbs and plants to look at the benefits of pasture diversity for us as farmers as well. So one of the real issues we've got on our farm is low iodine and low cobalt, which obviously affects our growth and our fertility in our animals. So we thought, well, hold on, actually, is it sort of doubly worthwhile trying to prove to ourselves it was worthwhile putting that time in, and what tree species we might want to plant as a result of it, and think around that future planning for your farm. And I'm really happy to share that data with anyone that would like it, because it's very Exmoor specific, because all the information we could find was really based a lot of American information when it was broken down. And then I'm just coming to the end. I always think it's really important to be honest around money, because obviously ultimately we need to be a profitable business, all of us as farmers, and just something to compare. This is our current cost of production. It's actually dropped a little bit for the cows because now they're fully outwintered. We have less straw costs. And I removed our rent from it so you can see it's more comparable if you're not a tenanted farm, or obviously everyone has a different rent set, but everything is put into that, the contractor costs of making the hay, and everything's broken down. So it's just something that might be of interest if you have that information for yourself. But I really wanted to touch on the importance of how we've funded a lot of the things we've done, because we don't have the capital ourselves as tenant farmers, not as new tenant farmers. So there's lots of really great ways of sort of getting involved in some of the sort of climate mitigation measures, which then obviously benefit the farm as well. So FIPL, which is Farming in Protected Landscapes, that has helped fund certain elements of it. Countryside Stewardship, mid-tier, and 10-year higher tier, which we're still in. So we have sort of 2 concurrent agreements currently. We're in SFI 23 and 24. We are also in a pilot landscape recovery project. And then we've a lot of the hedgerow funding for slowing the flow of water and the pond creation came through the Somerset Rivers Authority and the National Trust, who are landlords as well. So we try to only enter what matches how we farm, not trying to farm to match the subsidies or the grants. So just to explain that. Yeah, and then I'm also vice chair for the Nature Friendly Farming Network, which is just a really open network of getting people involved, having conversations. It doesn't matter where you are on your journey of farming. It's just about a way of connecting with others to think around solution focused and positive thinking going forwards. So yeah, I will stop sharing my screen. And hopefully you're back with.
Thank you, Holly. That was really good. And I'm glad the presentation and the slides worked for you in the end. That was just really unfortunate at the beginning. It's just,
I think the internet speed. I'm so sorry.
No, it was all good. A shame we couldn't see some of the videos, but it all worked really well, and that was really useful. And thank you ever so much for sharing how you guys have done things on your farm.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now, Nikki.
Oh, it's really odd.
There's another one that's out in the countryside. Poor old Nikki.
Can you hear me okay, Sam?
I can hear you now.
Oh, that's good. I don't know what was going on then. It just decided not to work for me either then for some reason. Okay, so next we have Has anybody got any questions for Holly before she skips off? I just wanted to double check. No, if you do have any questions for Holly, Holly said that she is very happy for us to share. So, get in touch with her in the future and share anything that any questions you have with her. So please do. But thank you, Holly. And I know you need to get off for your next meeting. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And we now have Rebecca Barker, one of our trading standards officers, who's going to talk about livestock identification, movements, etc., and recording.
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Becky Barker, Trading Standards Officer within the rural team, part of the Southwest Trading Standards Service. I just wanted to give a brief introduction to the sort of, I suppose, quite complicated legislatively area of identification, movement and recording for livestock. I wanted to give it a sort of a basic guide. There's quite a few things that I probably won't be touching on because I'd probably be here all night, such as imports, exports, and also obviously the movement of livestock can be affected by disease outbreaks. So obviously when this happens, we as inspectors, we revert from the standard legislation that we're used to looking at general licenses that come out. So just thinking, obviously, I don't know if anyone here is from the police as well, just looking at when you do livestock checks, bearing in mind if there's any disease outbreaks at the time, such as blue tongue, there might be different licenses that people are required to transport their livestock under. Sorry, if I could have a next slide, please, Nikki. So I'll have to keep saying that to you. The first thing that all new keepers must do, so if you go out and you purchase a cow, you must get a county parish holding number, so CPH number, within 1 month of keeping the livestock. That doesn't matter if you've got sort of one animal or 200. You've got to get that. The CPH numbers vary depending on your county, so for purposes of Devon, it's 10. For Somerset, it will all start with a 36 holding number. To do that, you contact the Rural Payments Agency on the phone number. This is all quite accessible on the websites. So that's for an occupier of a holding who begins to keep, or if they take on the premises or occupation of where livestock are kept. In addition to that, we must also contact APHA, the Animal and Plant Health Agency, and they'll start you up with the herd mark or the flock number that you need for your cattle, sheep, goats and pigs, etc. Again, they're on the same number, also email addresses for them. And I thought the other kind of basic thing to bear in mind, sorry, next slide, please, Nikki. Is the standstill rules. So they're governed by the Disease Control England Order 2003. There's also a number of general licenses which exist out there in the ether for all the different livestock breeds. So as a rule of thumb, if you've got pigs, if you move pigs onto a holding, they put a standstill on any pigs on that holding moving off for 20 days. So you cannot move other pigs off for 21 days. Cattle, sheep and goats, it's the same principle, but there's a 6-day standstill. The reasons for those being is that you can move on the 7th day. So when they were brought in, it was felt that people could then move to market every 7 days. So you could go to a Saturday market every week. As with all the legislation, there's a number of exemptions, such as moves to slaughter, different guidance for shows. But as I say, this is a basic sort of run through. Very happy to talk through in detail if anyone wanted to sort of look in or needed any further information. If I could have next slide, please, Nikki. So of cattle, sort of breaking it down to species, so cattle identification, movement and records, they're governed by the Cattle Identification Regulations 2007. Yeah, next slide, please, Nikki. So cattle obviously need to be identified for traceability purposes. This is to identify the herd of origin, also to ensure the integrity of British beef by ensuring that products that are going into the human food chain are fully traceable and as safe to eat as possible. It also enables tracing during disease outbreaks. So it supports the control and eradication of bovine diseases, for example, TB and foot and mouth disease. So I've also stuck to, I don't know if we've got any cattle knocking around that were born before 1998. I know we do come across some of the older girls in places. So I've sort of stuck to cattle born since 1st January 1998. And it's bearing in mind that legislation does change. Obviously, this is 2007, so fairly old, so maybe due some sort of refreshes. So all cattle born since 1st January 1998 must be identified with a pair of DEFRA approved ear tags. So that must be one primary and one secondary. So that's generally what you're looking for. The primary tends to be this larger yellow tag that you can see on screen. You can have the same size as a secondary tag, or it may be something called a button tag, which is just a little circular tag, or it might be a thin metal tag. But basically the primary one has to be distance readable. Not always possible with some of the hairy ears we come across in market, but there's obviously the set guidelines of what they should be, and they should all have the Crown logo at the top. Farmers can add on management information to these tags, sort of write it on but it's got to have this UK, which is followed by the herd mark, and then it's followed by the individual mark for that animal. Lost tags, as soon as they notice, got to be replaced within 28 days or before the animals move off the holding, sort of whichever is sooner. Sorry, next screen, please, Nikki. So there's different time limits for tagging. So dairy cows, legally the first tag must go in within 36 hours of the birth and the second within 20 days. All other herds, so I think that includes bison as well, that would be double tagged within 20 days of birth. Sorry, next slide, please, Nikki. So cattle passports, you may come across two different passports. Again, there are some older registration documents, but probably don't see too many of them now. The smaller checkbook style is the older of these two. You might see with some of the older animals, contains exactly the same information, but I say new, they've been in a while now. The sort of A4 document is the one you're more likely to see again, and that the passports will state the date of birth, the official ear tag number, the ear tag number of the dam of that animal, the breed and the sex. And this document's got to accompany the animal throughout its life, so from birth to death, and that's any movements, changes of ownerships, sales through markets, collection centres, etc. Sorry, my screen just froze then. So cattle passports are they've got to be applied for through the British Cattle Movement Society. So that's got to be within 7 days of tagging. So obviously the maximum is 20 days for the secondary tag. So that'd be within 27 days of the date of birth. Applications for passports have got to be within the time limits. Otherwise, farmers run the risk of refused passports. There's a chance to appeal depending on farm records, if they're up to date, if the dams are on the holding, you may be able to do DNA sampling, but again that sort of comes at a cost. So, and then the later it goes on, the less chance it is of having appeals successful appeals and having passports issued. Cattle that are on refused passports, they are not allowed to leave the holding alive, so they can stay, and you can breed from female animals and their calves can be registered. But obviously, if you've got a lot of male animals on refused passports, unfortunately, they're probably just costing money to feed, and there's not an awful lot that can be done with them. Yeah, next slide, please, Nikki. Yes, I think I've probably waffled on with that with the previous slide. If I could have next slide, please. Yeah, so on-farm records, so breeding records, again, dairy have got the shorter time to complete records, so that's breeding records, births within 7 days, other herds within 30 days. And again, as you would expect, so date of birth, breed, sex and dams identification number. Movement records on and off moves should be recorded within 36 hours, and that includes the ear tag, date of birth, breed, sex, dams ID number, the date of movement, and the holding and premise moved to and from. Death records must also be kept, and that's got to keep the date of death and disposal route. Quite often farmers will keep the commercial documents that's been issued if they've had a fallen stock company come out. Also got to put in date of any replacement tags, but that's only if the identity of the animal has changed and the animal was born before 1998. Again, these records can be kept in any format, really. So you don't have to be IT competent. They can be kept on paper, on a spreadsheet, or a lot of the on-farm management software has places for records to be kept, sort of automatic updating. If I could have next slide, please, Nikki. So movement reporting, so reported again to the British Cattle Movement Society within 36 hours for moves off, and on deaths within 7 days. You find with all the legislation that inspectors, so such as ourselves within the rural team, we're authorised under the legislation specific to those records, and that if we request records, they should be produced to us. Cattle records have to be kept for the longest, and that's 10 years. There, unfortunately, I couldn't get any of the links to go onto my PowerPoint. Sorry, apologies, it's been a bit hastily put together. So, but I can certainly, there's links on all the gov.uk websites and also our own training standards site that will take you into, you can get a template for how to keep records. Unfortunately, we did used to issue record books, but obviously with financial cuts, that unfortunately we don't have them to send out anymore. But it is something that we routinely inspect on farm visits. If I could have next slide, please, Nikki. So as I say, it's a very kind of brief run through of each species. So pigs, very similar. So that's governed by the Pigs Records Identification and Movement Order 2011. And no person can move a pig off a holding unless it's either got an ear tag, and that will be with the letters UK, followed by the herd mark, which is issued to you when you register with AFA. The herd mark will be 2 digits followed by 4 numbers. And again, I believe it goes within the county that you're registering them in. Also, pigs can also have a tattoo as a permanent form of identification, which I think on the next slide, please, Nikki, there's a photo of. So tattoos, sort of commonly known as slap marks. If you can see the black sort of smudge on those pigs by their neck and shoulder, that would be a tattoo. It's a permanent mark because it's the same as with the ear tags. these have got to withstand the slaughter process, basically. So you'll find that these smudges aren't always readable when the animal's alive, but when it goes through the slaughter process, this is the mark that will remain on the skin throughout, and it's literally applied with a slap marker, so it's just sort of slapped once onto the animal. It's something that we would maybe look at market to ensure that, you know, an animal hasn't got multiple slap marks on it, you know, to ensure that it's been done appropriately, marked onto the animal. So ear tags have got to be easy to read. They've got to be made of metal or plastic or combination of both. They've got to be tamper resistant, incapable of reuse, heat resistant, and designed to remain attached to the pig, as they all are, without harming it. As we know, though, you can quite often find injuries caused by ear tags. You quite often on all species might sort of see a bloody ear, or yeah, sort of ripped ears where they've perhaps caught in something. If I could have next slide, please, Nikki. So reporting movements, this has sort of changed over the years. So pre-notification is now needed for movement of pigs, again for disease control purposes. So it's up to the keeper at the departing farm to pre-notify AHDB pork before any pigs are moved off, and then keepers must notify their arrival in 3 days. There are some exemptions, such as movements to livestock markets or abattoirs, well, where they will actually confirm the movement and the receipt of the pigs. So yeah, obviously that would mean that you wouldn't have to pre-notify. Again, you don't have to be, you know, computer literate, and we're very conscious that, you know, there's a lot of farms out there that don't go online or don't have the rural web access, which is obviously completely fine. So reporting again either online by telephone or in writing. The pre-notification paperwork, this will be carried by the haulier, and that actually acts as the license. So that gives the haulier summary, which more legislation, hauliers obviously have to carry a certain amount of paperwork, and this will cover them for that their paperwork, for their transporter paperwork. It will also include any food chain information, details of the pigs. So obviously any declarations of any that have been under treatment, that withdrawal periods have been met, etc. Yeah, next slide, please, Nikki. So records, again, they can be kept, you know, sort of any format, so long as the required information is there. So again, that's the data movement, the identification of the pigs, how many have been moved in total, where they've been moved from, where they're moving to. Got to be done within 36 hours of the movement, kept for 3 years. And they also need a yearly count done, so you have a yearly total of how many pigs are on the holding. Pet pigs, really the same requirements. There's also, you can go onto the AFA website as well, the .gov.uk website, because walking licenses are needed. Obviously pet pigs to be taken out for a walk, so you need to sort of detail the route you'll be using, and AFA will look at that and decide upon whether issuing licenses. Yeah, and the yearly count is the maximum that's normally on the holding, and that's sort of got to be together with the actual amount. Yeah, if I can have next slide, please, Nikki. So I haven't gone into goats. I've sort of kept to although we do get a fair few amount of goats through markets and when we go on to farm, but they're also covered by the Sheep and Goats Records Identification Movement England Order 2009. Again, this is amended legislation. It's probably the lengthiest of the legislation for the species. records and ID. Yeah, if I could have next slide, please, Nikki. But again, as I don't know, going back several years ago, if people remember sort of S tags and the sheep sort of turning up with all number of tags and colours of tags in their ears. Obviously things have moved on, and obviously as the older sheep are no longer here, I think it's probably coming sort of easier. So identification for sheep. So 6 months, within 6 months, they must be identified. So that's if they're in a non-intensive rearing, or sorry, an intensive rearing system. So obviously if they're housed, that sort of thing, or 9 months if they're in an extensive rearing system. So perhaps sort of out on the hills, you know, not gathered in so often. That would give 9 months for identification. Looking at, so housed overnight would be 6 months, 9 months, yeah, if they're kept extensively, so not housed overnight. All animals, they've all got to be identified though before they leave the holding of birth, and that's including moves to slaughter, temporary grazing, common grazing, market, and that's whether or not the 6 or 9 months have gone by. Again, different forms of identification for sheep. Probably the most common are the ear tags. So like you can see on the screen, that's an electronic EID tag. Also, sheep can on occasion have tattoos. They may have pastern tags or boluses, which are read electronically. Again, there's always sort of changes going on. So it's always good to have sort of this presentation is no, compared to the legislation, is obviously just very brief. So whether you're looking at fully ID or a slaughter animal, so slaughter animals, rule of thumb is that they're under 12 months. So that would allow them to have a single EID tag, so it's an electronic tag, that will be yellow, and it will be just a batch number. So that's their flock mark. So that would be, if you see on the left-hand side, just a UK followed by a 0, followed by just the herd mark for the farm where they were born. The individual ID for that animal will be held within the microchip. That's why you might see at market animals being read with microchip readers. That will then all come up on the machine, and as you can see in market, that's all printed out their central point recording system. So that will all be printed out and recorded, so you can get the individual IDs. Again, various rules with them. If you have a lamb that's gone in with a slaughter tag on, it can be purchased, and the holding, if it goes onto a holding not to slaughter, it can be upgraded to full identification. Your breeders, so if you lambed and you know that some are going to be kept for breeding, you would then need to put full EID. So that's where they are double tagged, and that would be, as this tag is, the electronic tag with the UK 0 full herd mark, and then the individual ID will be printed on the tag. You will also see different colours for tagging. So EID tags, they must be yellow. Non-electronic devices, so if you want to put in any management tags, etc., they can be any colour apart from yellow, red or black. Yellow, as I said, is the EID tags. Red are replacement tags. So if an animal has lost its tag, you would put double red replacements in, either of the original ID, if that's known to you. If it's an animal that's come onto your holding and it's lost its tag, you would put a note in your movement record book to say that you've put double red replacements in with the new identification. And black tags will indicate that the animal's got a bolus. But yeah, any other colours can be used for sort of management. Yeah, again, touched on sort of replacement tags. Yes, so sheep, so historic sheep ID, so that's sheep again identified before December 2009. Again, I don't know if we've got any of them around still. They were identified by double tags, which had a flock mark and an individual number. Again, there's other variations, sort of different dates, 2003, 2008, 2001, 2003, and before 2001, where they didn't have to have a permanent mark. But again, I don't know if we're seeing any 24-year-old sheep around. So yeah, again, it's sort of moved on a lot. Replacing identification, the same with cattle, must be done within 28 days when it's discovered to be lost, or again before the sheep moves the holding. Moves from the holding. Sorry, next slide, please, Nikki. Movements and records. So movements currently reported to the livestock information system within 3 days, and that again can be by software. A lot of farms have the dedicated software which may automatically report movements. You can do it over the internet, or again by good old-fashioned quadruple movement license can be sent through the post. But again, there's exemptions to movements that you don't have to report, such as when they're moved to a veterinary practice, perhaps moves within the same within temporary land associations. Again, that's a whole another thing with temporary land associations that I won't go into tonight. But again, if anyone had any questions about it. Again, the same with pigs and cattle. Holding register can be a spreadsheet, farm software, or your good old movement record book. Similar sort of 36 hours to record replacement tags, new tags, and deaths. Quite often gets forgotten. You've got to include at the top the name and address of the holding. That's one thing that does tend to get left off sometime. And again, you'll be requested by DEFRA for a yearly inventory of the total number of sheep on the farm, and that sort of comes in around the beginning of December, and that's held on the animal movement licensing system. Again, death records are kept. Again, you should be getting commercial documents from your fallen stock collectors. If I could have next slide, please, Nikki. Yes, again, records. It depends on whether your animals have got fully ID or if you're doing batch recording. So batch recording obviously used for slaughter. So on your licenses, you can just record X amount of that batch. So that's your UK 0 with your herd mark, or fully ID for those that do have full identification with the individual numbers. For off movements, you can just keep the livestock information system document. But off movements, you've also got to keep the transporter and their vehicle registration number. On movements have always got to be the records in the on-farm records. So off, it's a bit more flexibility on just keeping the licenses. Again, keep records for 3 years. And as I touched on earlier, the central point recording system, they are in a lot of the markets, probably most of the markets. So that's where you'll see them walking around with the sheep wand, reading them, and they'll actually do the reading for you, and they can give you a print off of the animals that you've sent in. Obviously, perhaps dealers, or if you've bought in sheep from different originating premises, you could have a number of perhaps older ewes with all different herd mark or flock marks, and individual identifications. So the CPRC is the way to go with that, and they'll read them for you electronically. I think that's sheep. I haven't touched on goats, although they are covered by this. They do vary a bit from sheep, but I thought I'd stick to our basic sort of breeds that we see in markets. If I could have next slide, please, Nikki. Also just wanted to touch on keeping veterinary medicine records. Yeah, so records of all veterinary medicines that have been used to treat food-producing animals must be retained. This is under the veterinary medicine regulations and also the welfare of farmed animals regulations. This includes you've got to have one section for any veterinary medicines that you purchase and one for that you administer. So that includes everything really. So if you're using a bit of purple spray, that's got to go on. Anything that's been used, your TB test must go in your veterinary medicine records as well. And obviously any animal that's going sent for slaughter must clearly be after the end of the withdrawal period. Hence why there's a column for that in the veterinary medicine records. There's also columns for the person treating, obviously the identification of the animal, and that must be the ear tag number, or it can be if you're treating, perhaps you've wormed your entire batch of lambs, for example, and you've put a blue spray mark on them, you would just put sort of 50 lambs, blue spray mark or blue dot, something like that. So obviously the reasons for veterinary medicines being kept is to ensure that animal products for humans are safe and free from any residues. So that includes meat, but also all other products, so milk, eggs, honey, wool. So any species that produces that, they would be classed as a farmed animal, need veterinary medicine records. It's also got to provide a record that livestock have been treated in a timely and appropriate manner. So to avoid them being subjected to unnecessary suffering. So, for example, if you get a visit from Trading Standards or APHA and there's a sick animal, we can go to the farmer, could you show us proof that this animal's been treated? And hopefully they will have it all written down there, and we can say it's very much sort of work not recorded is work not done, which is what we get told. So yeah, that's another reason. And also to ensure that they've come from a legitimate source. Obviously within Trading Standards, you know, we do look at fraudulent suppliers, perhaps over the internet, you know, not just in the animal world. But yeah, so recording where they've actually been purchased from, or if they've come from their vets. Dispose of unwanted vet meds. You probably don't want unused veterinary medicines because they're pretty pricey, but usually vets will take them. That's the correct route they should go, really. And in that, you'd put in your records the date of disposal, the quantity disposed of, and how and where it was disposed of. But next slide, please, Nikki. Just briefly touching on the poultry register. I think due to obviously avian influenza, it's now a legal requirement that everyone, even if you just have one chicken, must register on the poultry register. Again, there's access to that on the .gov.uk site. It used to be 50 and over, but there's two separate sites now, one for 49 and under. So it's quite a straightforward form to fill in. If you're keeping poultry, racing pigeons, etc., there's certain record keeping requirements, and these records can include the movement of poultry and eggs on and off the premise, transport and marketing of poultry. Again, medicine treatments, you have to keep a daily record of mortality. So when you're inspecting a poultry, how many you're finding dead, measures put in place to control hazards, and tests and results for salmonella. Yeah, so that's since the 1st of October, actually 2024, that's coming in for the kept bird register. Again, any changes should be updated by registering. That'll allow APHA to get in contact with the owners for, in the case of any disease outbreaks within the area. Transport records, again, poultry fall into those, so that's where we're looking under different legislation, the Welfare of Animals Transport Order. that would include, so where you've got your license for pigs and sheep, where the information is on there, cattle and poultry, you would need to have an animal transport certificate document, and that's showing the origin, ownership, place of departure, date of departure, expected duration, and the intended destination. But again, there's some exemptions. So if you're going to a veterinary practice, if it's not in connection with an economic activity, so perhaps if your hobby may be going to show them and you're not going to sell them, and farmers with their own birds, this also applies for the other species, in their own means of transport for less than 50 kilometres from their holding, and they've got to be kept for 6 months. Sorry, medicine records, I should have said they need to be kept for 5 years. Yeah, if I could have next slide, please, Nikki. Yeah, as I say, I had a fun and games with my PowerPoint. It's sure it's user error. But there's lots of links, lots of information out there. Our trading standards, we have a lot of farming standards guidance leaflets, and that's for agriculture and animal feed, that are really useful. You can put a pack together for yourself. That also links into movement record templates, veterinary medicine record book templates, and the poultry register, again, .gov.uk. Usually if you just type something into Google, that'll be the first one, and APHA that'll come up, allows you to get much more information. So they're all very detailed, but yeah, next slide, please, Nikki. Yeah, so as I say, that I haven't touched on goats. There are also certain records and tagging requirements for farm deer, but I haven't gone into that. That's a whole other bit of legislation as well. So, but again, very happy to always talk through with anyone if anyone's got any queries. But yeah, thank you for listening to me. If anyone's got any questions.
Thanks, Becky. Can you hear me okay?
I can,
my
yeah.
computer keeps being a bit odd. Yeah, I haven't seen any questions in the chat, so I'll just double check. Sometimes I can't always view them. I think someone might be Lucy might be just typing in there now, so just give me a second. Oh, she's just saying that was great. So thank you, Lucy, for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really difficult to shorten the information down,
Yes.
I always think, because there's so much of it that you just, if you start on one bit, you have to include another bit, and then you have to include another bit. So so there's no quick way around movement recording and tagging and things like that. But I think it's always good to have a reminder and a refresher for us all, really.
Yeah, any errors in tagging, etc., particularly sheep, are my own. So.
And also the medicine records as well. Is it compulsory to put the TB test in there? I wasn't sure if it was just best practice or whether they, you had to have the test dates, because obviously you're injecting them, but I wasn't sure whether that had to be recorded or not.
I believe it is. I know when I'm out with APHA, the vets will always say, put your TB test in. Yeah, whether it's best practice, I suppose you are injecting them with a form. Yeah, I don't know. I'll check that. I'm thinking yes, but I will double check.
And Lucy's just asked if it is compulsory to keep medicine records for the birds.
Yes, you need medicine records for birds. It be within the welfare of farmed animals regs, so you certainly need mortality. Again, they're going into the food chain, so you would need yeah, medicine records for them.
Thank you. I think there's as a hobby, keeping home eggs. I think the TB test and Naomi reckons the TB test is compulsory.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nom. I was a bit iffy. I wasn't sure whether it was like a best practice thing or a compulsory. So that's good, because I don't think I've always seen that in the medicine records when I've been checking. So that will be good to look out for that.
I think you can just get the label, the batch number off of the tuberculin pot that's used.
Oh,
It's a hobby
so
keep.
I think Lucy's meaning in the questions that so does she need to keep them if she just keeps the birds for her own purposes for keeping for eating your own eggs, basically?
I would say no for that, but can I get back to you on that, Lucy? I think I would, because you're not it's not for a commercial reason, is it? You're not selling them. I will double check and get back to you on that.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, I'm not sure if anyone else has any. Oh, hang on, there's one more question. Am I right in thinking most of these rules don't count if you're consuming yourself at home?
It's do you mean sort of all of is it just the veterinary medicines ones, Sheila, or the movement? The problem is because they're farmed animals, so even if they're pets, and no one likes to think of it if they are pets, say something was to happen to you and your pets were rehomed and I don't know, people weren't aware that they were pets and they ended up in the food chain. That's why it would then apply to them. So any medicines that, anything that have been treated. So that's why so farmed animals are sort of classed as anything that's giving meat, feathers, wool, fur. So you've got sort of your llamas, your alpacas out there for wool and fur. So yeah, that's if it's a specific, I'd need to look into it, such as the eating your own eggs, which I don't think you would need to. But I will double check on that if that's okay.
Of course it is, but yeah, we don't know. You don't always necessarily know the answer straight away, or if we haven't looked it up for a while. So it's always quite good to refresh our memories as well.
Yeah, chickens and eggs and selling at the farm gate and that sort of thing is always it's not an area I'm that great on, so I will check.
Okay. If nobody else has any questions, I'm just double checking. No, that was just a thank you. So yeah, thank you, Becky. I really appreciate you taking your time to do that for us this evening. And it's always good for all of us to have a refresher. And if everyone's happy, we'll move on now to Richard Sampson from the Farming Community Network, who has been waiting patiently in the wings to come and talk with us this evening as well. Hi, Richard.
Good evening. Do you want me to cut my time down a bit, or does it not matter?
It's totally up to you. We always say that they run between sort of 6 and 8 o'clock, so you're absolutely fine to chat away for as long as you want to.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short then.
It's fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Richard Sampson, so I'm part of FCM, which is the Farming Community Network, as it is on your screen. I'm apologising that I haven't got any slides, but I never seem to follow them anyway, so it might be a good thing. But so I'm just going to do a very sort of general overview of FCN and what's involved really. So we're a charity that helps farmers. We are nationwide. I'm not sure actually if we go into Scotland. We are now going into Scotland a bit with Macmillan, but I'll come on to that later. But definitely sort of England and Wales. I don't think we are in Scotland. And we're divided into regions. And so I'm the RSO, which is a regional support officer for Devon. So I'm in the Southwest region. We've got the Southeast region, the Midlands, East Midlands, East, North, and then we're in Wales as well. So most of the areas have got one RSO, but the Southwest we have 3. So I cover Devon. We've got a guy that covers Cornwall, and a lady that is in Somerset. Was also sort of responsible for Dorset and Wiltshire. The reason why we've got so many in the Southwest is because there are a lot more farm holdings within our counties. In Devon, we've got about 8,500 farm holdings. In Cornwall is 4,500, so that totals 13. Somerset, Dorset, Wiltshire, and Gloucester have another 13,000, which is 26, and that is about a quarter of England. So obviously there are a lot of farmers in our area, and so that makes us one of the busiest areas within FCN. So we also have about 400 volunteers across the country. In Devon, we have about 40. Some of them I class as sleeping volunteers, so they are there. Not all of them perhaps are very active. Some of them are very active, and I will tell you a bit what they do as we go on. So what do we do? So we're here to listen and support farmers and to walk beside them. The founder of FCN was a chap called Christopher Jones, and that was his original idea, inspired by a portion in the Bible, in Luke's Gospel, where two people were really walking along a road to a place called Emmaus. They were really struggling with everything in life, I suppose, and what had happened. And Jesus came alongside and walked with them. And that is what we really do at FCN. So we try to support people by walking alongside them. So we will go out and visit them if that's what they want. Not everybody wants to visit, and probably more people don't want to visit nowadays. They're quite happy to talk over the phone, especially the younger element. And but the main thing that we're sort of taught to do is listen. So talking on here for 20 minutes without anybody else saying anything, I find it quite hard. But anyway, so I'll keep going just to try to sort of keep it short. So FCN is a Christian ethos to help other people, but we're not judgmental in any way, and we will support anybody, whatever faith they are, whatever color or any other thing that nowadays comes up. Right, so some of the things that we specifically do. So the main thing is our helpline, and there's an e-helpline as well, which people can send in emails if they don't want to talk to anybody. So that the telephone helpline is open from 7 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. If anybody rings after 11, it gets put through to the Samaritans. So there is a 24-hour cover. That helpline is open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So when anyone was to ring into the helpline, you will speak to most often one of our volunteers that man the helpline. It's all done from home now, and so people can sit in their kitchen or wherever they be and take your calls. So when you talk to people, when you phone in and talk to a volunteer, they make up a case file, and depending on where you are in the country, it then gets sent to the RSO, the regional support officer in that area. So if someone rang in from Devon, that case file would be sent to me. So then I look at it. Usually quite often the volunteers that man the helpline also give me a ring to say about the the case and to give me a brief description, because not always is the case file 100% accurate. Sometimes we get the wrong telephone number, sometimes we get the wrong the postcode, and so that sometimes makes it a little bit awkward, but most times 99% I should say is correct. So when I get the case file come through, I will read it, and then either goes sort of two directions. I can either do that case myself, or if I've got a volunteer that is quite reasonably close by and has got the skill set to be able to help that person, then I will send it to the volunteer, and the volunteer will contact that person. So what sort of things do we get in? Do people ring up about? Probably most times in a month we usually get about 80 calls thereabouts. So usually about 20 a week across the country, and quite often, like we here in Devon, we get 3 or 4 a week, so we get quite a high number. But probably the biggest one that people call in about is their mental well-being, mental health. But that is quite often, there's usually perhaps more than just that mental health. There's usually a reason behind things, and quite often that it could be 2 or 3 things. But the other things that sort of come up, and probably the next on the list would be the financial cases, and I've had 2 or 3 come in the last week. So the financial issue is a big factor within farming. And then we go, probably the next one is family, and that there can be a lot of family issues, and so that goes down to from perhaps separation. So husband and wife separate, and obviously that has a big impact within the farm. Sickness, unfortunately we all get sick or ill or have accidents, and we're not able perhaps to do things, and that puts strain on the remaining people within the farming business. So succession as well, between sort of the older generation and the younger generation, which is not always easy. And obviously that is very topical since October with what the government are trying to do. And don't ask me to explain it, because I don't think they really know really, but yeah, trying to make things difficult for farmers. But also on those sort of things, we do offer mediation. So we get people together and get people talking. Going on there, we quite often get disease and TB, blue tongue, avian flu. There are quite a few chicken farmers around. So that are the main things that people bring up about that they have problems or struggling with or issues. And yeah, so that's the main thing. We work with lots of other organizations, 2 of them that the farmers don't always like, but we get on quite well, especially with the first one, which is Trading Standards. Quite often Trading Standards get called into farms, and if the farmer is struggling, they will give us a ring, and I hope I got quite a good relationship with the ones that are on the Teams meeting tonight. So but also that's animal health as well. And so animal, obviously when they go into a farm, they have a job to do, but farmers are very difficult people to sort of get on with, and they don't like change quite often, and sometimes it's difficult. And as I say, it's quite often small steps, and I hope they're listening to me. Small steps that to sort of get to farmers to get them to change. They don't like big change all at once, and and then we work quite well with the young farmers clubs here in Devon, and try to support them, obviously, because that is the future of our farming. Those young farmers taking on the family farms quite often. Then we work with other charities, the RABI, Addington, Yellow Wellies, etc., and we get on very well on a local level with the RABI. They work slightly different to what we do. They offer a counselling service, and the local lady will go in, and she's really good at if people are struggling to get attendance allowance, etc., things like that, and other sort of benefits. So that's quite good. So then we work with whoever really. So the NFU, the CLA, Country Landowners Association, quite often will ring us to say they're worried about somebody. And then you've got vets, auctioneers, and then farm supplies like machinery dealers, feed firms, and many others. And if they're worried about any of their customers or that, quite often they will sort of give us a heads up, and quite often that might be financial, but the other thing is if we do get referred by somebody, they need the permission of that person before we can contact them, and if they don't get that, we're not allowed to give them a ring. So that is very important. So as I said, we work with the auctioneer. So we work with Kivels. So we're in Exeter Market. So on a Friday we have a stand there, so anybody can come up and talk to us. So that is as a chaplaincy thing. So so we can talk to help people whatever they need there, and quite often that is a useful place to be. So then we've got we work with other firms, companies, charities. One of the big ones at the moment is Macmillan, and we've gone into a partnership with Macmillan, and they've identified that they struggle to get their services out to the rural population, especially the farmers and people that live in the countryside. So they've come to us, and so we've taken on some people to sort of get that message out there, to tell people what support there is. And so we've got 6 or 7 across the country, people that are working in conjunction with Macmillan to help sort of get the cancer awareness out there as well. We also have a website, and which tells you everything you need to know really about farming. I think there's so much information on there, and so do have a look at that website, and if you need to find out anything, that's a good place to actually start. So then we do shows and events, and so you quite often see us at the local shows and Devon County Show, and we have been sharing a stand with Trading Standards, which has been really good. And we do any other events that people want us to come and have a table at. So we go to quite a few like sort of different companies, if sort of local firms like Molehaven or like Southwest Fixings. We went down to Glendinning, Harper's have an open day, so quite often we will go and be there at those as well. We also run our own meetings, so we have a carol service in Exeter Market, and we have a plough service, and which is coming up actually, and I will read. I could have put this one up on a slide, couldn't I? I will read that. So that our plough service is at Bradnich at St Dyson's Parish Church on Sunday the 9th of February, and at 3 p.m. and the speaker is Reverend Hazel Britton. So that's something for your diary there. And we get the young farmers are coming, and I think they actually bring a plough into the service, so that will be quite good. Yeah, so that's that one there. And then we do other meetings on different things. So we will get a speaker come and do a talk perhaps on succession planning, obviously again very topical, or if somebody wants anything specifically, we can sort of organize those as well. And we do breakfasts, which are very popular, as you can imagine, with farmers, so that's just about sort of, well, and other meetings as well, where we get farmers together, perhaps give them a bit of food, have a speaker. It just gets people together, and I'll say a bit about, well, I'll say that one of those is I started a vintage farmers group. So those that were here last week would have heard me talking about that one there. So quite often some of the cases that we get into the helpline are sort of retired farmers, not that farmers ever retire, but farmers that are sort of perhaps over sort of what would be called normal retirement age for the general population of about 66 or whatever it is at the moment. So yeah, so quite often we get calls come in to say, well, my dad or someone, he won't go out anywhere, and he's very lonely, since COVID, the sort of open meetings, there are not so many. There used to be farm sales during the summer, sort of nearly somewhere. Most weeks there would be one somewhere across the county, so people would go out to that. So now it's just sort of exemplified the isolation of farming. There are less markets about, less often as well. So there was a time when there were markets all over the place. There was Market Hatherley and other places, and they've closed. So you go a long way, and people don't probably go so far to go to those markets unless you need to go there to take animals or buy animals. So that isolation is very difficult. So we started the Vintage Farmers Group in Crediton, and that has been really successful. We've been getting sort of 35, 40 people to most times we meet. That sort of is once a month on the last Wednesday, and yeah, so we're looking at, as FCN, to roll that out right across the country, if possible, especially in the southwest anyway. And I think there's one or two groups, one group down in Cornwall that has started as well. So we're looking to roll that out just to help those elderly farmers mainly. So, and then we do different talks, as I'm doing tonight, and other groups that we would do a talk. When so I've been as the RSO now since September not last year, September 23. So coming up to 18 months. The first thing I had to do, I had to go and do a talk to about 24, 25 solicitors in Exeter. So that was rather challenging for me, because I'm just a simple farmer, and to talk to all these solicitors, I was sort of a bit apprehensive, but that was really good actually, and they were very. It was the farming side of the solicitors, and so that was very useful. So we do talk. So if you want know anybody that wants to talk, we can do that. We do a little bit of training, mainly that's from the head office. So there's training available, and they will roll that out, sort of obviously mainly on Zoom, but different training things that we do. And I think they can go and do a training session at different places, but that's from the main office. So yeah, as I said, we're a charity, so financial things, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about that. Unfortunately, we are not able to provide any funding to help people when they get in difficulties. And I'll explain why. I've got a case at the moment, and a chap is really struggling. He took out a £40,000 loan a couple of years ago for a 6-year period. Unfortunately, it was with an unregulated lender. The total he's going to have to pay back I think, is about 115,000. He's now struggling to do that. I don't know what the interest rate is. I don't want to even think about it really. But he asked if we could provide funding to help him pay it off. So I said to him, well, if we had £1 million, I said it would be gone in a couple of days, and that, so it's just not possible that to provide funding, and it would be quite awkward to sort of to say who would get that anyway. And how is FCN funded? So we're funded by donations. So we have a fantastic support in Devon and elsewhere. So the young farmers quite often raise money for us. Churches will do, and lots of individuals will, and different sort of companies support us by giving money and helping us raise money. They'll run quizzes or different things, and so that's really fantastic. And then we get partnerships with different organisations like Macmillan. So Macmillan are putting in some money to help sort of do that. The government also put in some money, and we also run surveys for the government as well at times on different issues like TB and various things. So what are the funds used for? Where does the money go, is I hear everybody asking. So I think we've got a staff of between 15 and 20. The majority of those are part-time. So I'm on 17.5 hours a week. There are a few full-time staff, and so we've got other costs that go with that, like the literature and merchandise that we use. And then, so if volunteers go out and visit people, we try to encourage them to claim their expenses. Not all of them will do that, but we just feel that if they're incurring an expense like travel to, and here in Devon, they can go quite a way. Quite often is what I say, because I'm fairly central, and I can go an hour nearly each way, north, south, east and west, and still be within Devon. And so we can travel quite a distance even within Devon. And then we provide like sort of at times we quite often do breakfasts and different meetings, and so that's some of the things that we support. And obviously there's other costs within running an organization, and we have got offices, but I don't think we use them very much now, because since COVID, as a lot of people, we work from home. So that really is, try to be fairly quick. I think I've more or less said everything I need to. Are there any questions, please?
Thanks, Richard. That was really, really good. I think I don't think I remember half of what you guys actually do, if you know what I mean, because obviously we have spend a lot of time with you, you know, assisting us on farm or assisting the farmers while we are on farm. I know I've had quite a few instances. I've had a couple where I've turned up and the farmer's not really wanted to do the visit without you guys, so we've kind of waited, and then one of you've turned up to kind of exactly like you say, really walk alongside him while we're doing our inspection. And
Yeah.
I definitely think it's made them feel more comfortable having you guys around, and just yeah, just make them feel a bit more confident about what we're doing and why we're there, kind of thing, really. And I also, yeah, just wanted to reiterate about the fact that a lot of the people that come out and help are actually, yeah, volunteers, and like you say, they can just claim back their expenses, but a lot of them don't do that, and a lot of them are there and just want to give up their time to help, really, which I think is a massive, you know, it's a very kind thing to do, and you know, we're all very grateful for it, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, they are fantastic volunteers. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like sort of when you go to a show, like sort of for a volunteer to come and be at a show, that can be, even if they do half a day, that can be like sort of 5 or 6 hours time they get there,
Yeah.
and then get home again. And yeah, so they are really fantastic. The volunteers that we've got right across the country. There's some wonderful people. Yeah.
And I think Becky's just put her hand up, so I'm not sure, Becky, have you got a question?
Oh yeah, thanks, Nikki. Yeah, thanks, Richard. That was really, really helpful. Yeah, and you guys do an amazing job, you know, working alongside with Earth. I just wondered, I think we're sort of seeing a bit of a trend again in single elderly farmers they're keeping, you know, large numbers of stock and sort of very low. I think one of our hardest things is to try and encourage people to cut down their numbers, especially this time of year. I wondered if you have any sort of guidance that you could maybe share with us on how I know everything's a very personal, individual case by case basis, but I think that's, for me, a couple of my jobs, really, you know, that's really struggling. Yeah, and no succession planning, you know.
Yeah, it's very difficult because there are two things. Obviously, like I said, that yeah, they don't like being told what to do, and they've also done things that way for such a long time. They don't like to change, but the only way that I found that is really successful is to do it a little bit at a time. And we had a case that I was involved with Chris Rice for quite some time, and yeah, the chap wasn't able to look after his animals properly, and yeah, I think there were some dead sheep and that, and he couldn't do what he needed to do. So it was gradual persuasion to reduce those animals over time. There's no way, and now I think he's got 4 cattle and two tame lambs. I hope he hadn't bought any more since. I don't think he has. But yeah, it was a real sort of gradual process to sort of get him to cut those numbers right down. And if we'd have gone in and said, oh, you need to stop farming or get rid of all your animals, they just put up a block wall. So it's a case of getting their trust, and then just gentle persuasion. And the thing is, it might take possibly 12 months or more even to sort of achieve that. But I think if we can do that, that is worth the time. And of course, with cattle and that, TB comes in the way of things as well. Yeah, sorry, that was quite a long answer.
That's all right.
No, thank you.
Was there anything else, Becky, or?
No, that's good. Yeah, just to know, I think that's probably what we try and do, isn't it? It's the sort of revisits and encouragement and sort of trying to encourage, show them the I suppose silver lining side of not having so many, and how that could benefit them in the future. And but yeah, it's a very tricky one, isn't it? It's very emotive. And
yeah, I think if you perhaps if you do get us involved, it almost sort of comes as a like sort of we're on their side. They still quite often view it as them against you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Although you've been really fantastic, and but what has always sort of previously was the case, that you would come in and then prosecute people. That stigma is still there a little bit, but it's not what happens now, which is fantastic. But if you call me in, I need to gain their trust. I can't just go in and say, "Oh, you should do this." They need to trust me a little bit to start with, before I then say, well, what if you do this and that, and sometimes we got to make it a bit sort of pressurize them a little bit by saying, well, if you don't do this, this might happen, or whatever. But trust is a big thing, I think, isn't it?
I agree, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Becky.
I was just saying thank you. Sorry.
I didn't mean to overspeak then. Sorry.
No.
We've just got a couple of things in the chat just to mention. One comment saying very informative, and you provide an invaluable service. And another one from Lisa saying, hi, I have my husband here who is very interested in the work and will take this forward with his customers and friends within the farming community. And I think that's something that it's great when we can spread the word as a organization. We go out and we're obviously mentioning you guys on a regular basis for people that that might need that extra little bit of support or someone to speak to. And I know with Rabbi as well, we try our best to kind of mention those support services wherever possible, if we think we can signpost them to you. So yeah, that's great.
What I usually say is if I'm doing a talk, or especially if it's to farmers, or even when I'm at the plough service or anything like that, I usually do a talk and I say, well, there's no way that we can get to everybody where we need to get to. So you need to look out for your neighbor. And quite often farmers do watch what their neighbor does. And also the other thing I say is that quite often we do things in a set pattern. So you go out and see your cattle at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning every day, or your sheep, or whatever it may be. So what I say to people is, if you actually notice something's different or not right, just go in and talk to them and just see that they're all right. Yeah, because there's 8,500 holdings within Devon is a huge amount, and yeah, so we do need people's help. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard. Well, if nobody else has any questions, then we'll just go on to the closing few slides. So thanks ever so much to everybody who's spoken this evening. We are obviously coming to a close with our Future Farm Resilience project now. However, the business information point are still open for business, so to speak, and there will be an element of workshops, so one-to-one support and digital and training. I'm not sure to what extent it will be relating to the Future Farm Resilience. However, it would be worth still keeping in contact, still looking on the business information point site, and you can always contact them on by phone as well, for updates on what's still being available. And also each time when we do these webinars, we like to share with you about the Hub of Hope. It's something that myself and colleagues use quite a regular basis. It's something that is obviously relevant nationally. So it's a search engine basically, where you can put in your postcode of the area of the support service that you're looking for, and also you can select to the type of support service that you might need, and then that will bring up the ones that are in a mileage radius of where the postcode is, because as we've been doing this support project, we've realised that even just across the borders between Cornwall to Devon to Somerset, etc., the services that are available do differ quite a lot, and what's available in one community network doesn't necessarily mean it is available in the next county. Okay, thanks, Sam. And to finish our Future Farm Resilience project, we have a final breakfast, which we are holding on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, at Sedgemoor Livestock Market at 10:30 in the morning. We did one in Devon a few weeks ago at Holsworthy Market, and we managed 25 breakfasts. So as it says at the top, it is free. It's everyone's welcome, and so if you can spread the word as best you can, and if you'd like to join yourselves to come along and join us, there will be representatives from NFU, there will be representatives from FCN, ourselves, and RABI. So it would be really, really great to see as many people as possible. And I think that might be it. Has anybody got anything final they wanted to say before we say good evening? No.
Just thanks very much to you and Sam, Nikki, for all your hard work in arranging all of these webinars. You've done an amazing job on top of all the work that you guys already do, and yeah, you've done a brilliant job.
Oh, that's really kind of you, Becky. Thank you. And
Thanks, Becky.
like we said before as well, they are all available on our website at Heart of the South West Trading Standards under the farming support section. They are all there. So if there's any that you'd like to, you can scroll back through, see what the topics are, and see if there's any speakers that you might be interested in listening to. And also after this evening's webinar, we will make sure that it's anyone that has registered for tonight, the webinar will be sent directly to them so that you can re-listen to it in your own time. And I think that's it. So thank you ever so much, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at the big breakfast in a few weeks.